Rex, a German shepherd with distinctive black and tan markings, began his journey at the Military Working Dog Training Center at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. At just 14 months old, he stood out among his peers for his exceptional drive, intelligence, and work ethic. Some dogs have the physical ability but lack the focus. Others have the focus but lack the courage. Rex had the perfect combination of all the traits we look for, said Master Sergeant Robert Collins, who oversaw Rex's initial training. In 20 years of training military dogs, I'd put him in the top 1%. Rex's natural abilities made him an ideal candidate for explosive detection training, one of the most demanding and critical specializations for military working dogs. He mastered the detection of over 25 different explosive compounds and demonstrated remarkable composure under the stressful conditions designed to simulate combat environments. By age 2, Rex had completed his training and was paired with Staff Sergeant David Martinez, a 27-year-old from Oregon with 2 previous deployments as a dog handler. Their initial bonding period was supposed to last 8 weeks, but it was evident much sooner that they were an exceptional team. Martinez and Rex clicked immediately, recalled Lieutenant Alicia Reyes, who supervised the handler-dog pairings. It was like they could read each other's minds. Martinez would notice subtle changes in Rex's behavior that even our experienced trainers would miss. In June 2014, Rex and Martinez deployed to Afghanistan for their first tour together. Assigned to a forward operating base in Helmand Province, they conducted daily patrols to secure routes for troop movements and supply convoys. Within their first month, Rex detected a buried IED that could have devastated an entire convoy. "That first find probably saved a dozen lives," said Captain Jason Thornton, their commanding officer during that deployment. The Taliban had hidden it well, underneath fresh asphalt on a regularly traveled road. No visual inspection would have caught it, but Rex alerted perfectly. That's when we knew we had an extraordinary team. Over the next 3 years, Rex and Martinez completed 2 successful deployments, with Rex credited for finding 17 confirmed IEDs and probably many more potential threats. Their effectiveness led to them being specifically requested for high-risk missions and operations. Martinez's devotion to Rex was evident to everyone who served with them. He slept with Rex in his quarters rather than leaving him in the kennels, shared his meals with him, and advocated fiercely for Rex's needs and rest periods. Martinez always said, "Rex works harder than anyone in this unit, and he does it for nothing but love and praise," remembered Sergeant Kimberly Chen, who served alongside them. He made sure everyone understood that Rex wasn't equipment. He was a soldier deserving the same respect as any other. By their 3rd deployment in late 2017, Rex had reached his prime at 5 years old, experienced enough to have developed a 6th sense about threats but still young enough to handle the physical demands of the job. Martinez had been offered a training position back in the States that would have kept them both out of harm's way, but he declined, believing their work in the field was saving too many lives to step away. In April 2018, Rex and Martinez were attached to a unit conducting clearance operations near Kandahar. On the morning of April 12th, they were tasked with clearing a route for a convoy delivering medical supplies to a remote village. The intelligence suggested the route might be targeted, said Major Thomas Wilson, who authorized the mission. "That's exactly why we sent Rex and Martinez in first. They were our best chance at preventing casualties." What no one anticipated was the level of sophistication in the ambush that had been prepared. As Rex began working the route, he alerted on a suspicious area, sitting down as he was trained to do when detecting explosives. Martinez followed protocol, marking the location and calling in the explosive ordnance disposal team. What we didn't know was that there was a secondary device, triggered not by pressure but by remote detonation, explained EOD Specialist Devin Rodriguez. The enemy had spotters on a nearby ridge. They waited until the team was gathered around the first device before triggering the second. The blast killed Martinez instantly and severely injured 2 other soldiers. Rex was thrown nearly 20 feet by the explosion, suffering shrapnel wounds to his left flank and a concussion. Despite his injuries, witnesses reported that Rex regained consciousness and dragged himself back to Martinez's body, where he stood guard, bleeding and disoriented, until the medevac arrived. "He wouldn't let anyone near Martinez at first," said combat medic Paulo Sanchez, one of the first responders. "Even injured as he was still trying to protect his handler. It took another dog handler talking him down to finally get him to stand aside so we could recover Martinez's body." Rex was evacuated to a veterinary facility at Bagram Air Base, where he underwent surgery to remove shrapnel and received treatment for his injuries. While his physical recovery progressed well, the veterinary staff began noticing concerning behavioral changes. "The physical wounds healed, but something else was broken," said Captain Jennifer Walsh, the veterinarian who treated Rex. "He became hypervigilant, wouldn't respond to commands from new handlers, and showed unpredictable aggression, classic canine PTSD. Military working dogs showing such severe behavioral changes after trauma would typically be evaluated for rehabilitation or retirement. In Rex's case, multiple handlers attempted to work with him over a 2-month period, but his condition only deteriorated. He'd go from completely shut down to explosively reactive with no warning," explained Technical Sergeant Marcus Bailey, who supervised Rex's rehabilitation attempts. "He couldn't focus on detection work anymore, which made him not just ineffective but potentially dangerous in the field." In August 2018, Rex was officially classified as unadoptable and unsuitable for continued service. Under standard protocols, this would typically lead to euthanasia for dogs considered too traumatized or aggressive for civilian adoption. Rex's distinguished service record earned him a temporary reprieve, but his future remained highly uncertain as he was transported back to the United States. "We had a dog who had saved countless American lives, who had given everything to his service, and who was now broken by that same service," said Walsh. The tragedy of potentially losing him after he'd already lost his handler seemed unconscionable, but we were running out of options. Michael Reynolds scrolled through his Facebook feed late one night in September 2018, unable to sleep as the anniversary of his son's death approached. Brian Reynolds had been a Marine, killed by an IED in Afghanistan's Helmand province just 14 months earlier. As a former Army medic who had served 2 tours himself, Michael understood the risks his son had faced, but that knowledge did nothing to ease the grief that had settled into the Reynolds household. Those nights were the worst, Michael would later recall. Sarah would finally fall asleep after crying, and I'd be alone with my thoughts, looking at photos of Brian, wondering what I could have done differently. It was during one of these sleepless nights that Michael came across a post shared by a veterans group about Rex, a military working dog who had lost his handler in an explosion and was now deemed too traumatized for service or standard adoption. The post included a photo of Rex and described his exceptional service record, including the 17 confirmed IEDs he had detected. It also mentioned that the explosion that killed his handler had occurred near Kandahar, not far from where Brian had been stationed. "Something just clicked," Michael explained. "Maybe it was the coincidence of location, or maybe it was the look in that dog's eyes in the photo. He had the same 1,000-yard stare I saw in the mirror every morning." Without waking his wife, Sarah, Michael sent an inquiry email to the contact listed in the post, a nonprofit organization called Veteran Canine Rescue that specialized in finding homes for difficult-to-place military dogs. He didn't expect a response until morning, but his phone rang just 20 minutes later. "The urgency in their response told me everything I needed to know about Rex's situation," Michael said. "They were running out of time and options for him." Megan Winters, the coordinator for Veteran Canine Rescue, explained that Rex was being held at a specialized facility but was considered a challenging case. 3 potential adoptions had already fallen through after initial meetings, with Rex showing extreme anxiety and defensive aggression towards strangers. "They didn't sugarcoat anything," Michael remembered. Megan told me Rex had bitten 2 handlers during attempted retraining and wouldn't let anyone touch him except one specific veterinarian. She said most families would find him unmanageable and potentially dangerous. Despite these warnings, or perhaps because of them, Michael felt compelled to discuss the possibility with Sarah. The next morning, he showed her the information about Rex and tentatively suggested they might consider adopting him. I expected resistance, Michael admitted. We had a 10-year-old daughter, Emma, and a relatively small house. Taking on a traumatized military dog seemed like an objectively bad idea. To his surprise, Sarah immediately connected with the concept. She looked at Rex's photo for a long time, Michael recalled. Then she said something I'll never forget. He's lost his person, and we've lost our boy. Maybe we're meant to help each other. The Reynolds family began the extensive application process required by Veteran Canine Rescue, which included detailed questionnaires, virtual interviews, home evaluations, and background checks. Their application was strengthened by Michael's military background and his current work as a physical therapist, which gave him experience with trauma and rehabilitation. The organization was thorough, which we appreciated, said Sarah. They weren't going to place Rex in a home that couldn't handle his needs, but they also recognized that Michael and I were stubborn enough and experienced enough to maybe have a chance. In October 2018, the Reynolds family drove 6 hours to the facility where Rex was being housed. Their first meeting was conducted under tightly controlled conditions, with Rex behind a partial barrier and a professional handler managing him. He was magnificent, Sarah remembered. Even in that stressed state, you could see what an exceptional dog he was. But you could also see the trauma. He paced constantly, his eyes never stopped moving, scanning for threats. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't truly rested in months. Rex showed little interest in the family during that first meeting, avoiding eye contact and maintaining his distance. When Michael attempted to move closer, Rex issued a low warning growl that the handler instructed them to respect. It wasn't personal, explained Carlos Mendez, the handler working with Rex that day. He'd generalized his trauma response to all humans, especially men. He wasn't seeing the Reynolds family. He was seeing potential threats. Despite the challenging first encounter, the Reynolds family completed 2 more visits over the next week. By the 3rd visit, Rex would accept treats from Sarah if tossed from a distance, though he remained wary of Michael and frightened by Emma's quick movements. Most families would have walked away, Mendez noted. The Reynolds saw something in Rex worth fighting for. After extensive consultation with the rescue organization's behaviorists and review by their placement committee, Rex was approved for adoption to the Reynolds family under specific conditions. They would need to work with a professional trainer, maintain secure containment at their home, and follow a structured integration plan. On November 15, 2018, Rex was transported to the Reynolds home in Colorado. The journey itself was stressful for Rex, who had to be sedated for the drive. When they arrived, Michael had prepared a quiet, separate space in their finished basement where Rex could decompress without being overwhelmed by the new environment. We'd essentially converted our basement into a safe room for him, Michael explained. Minimal furniture, covered windows, white noise machine, multiple exit routes so he'd never feel cornered. We set up a camera so we could monitor him without imposing our presence. The first night, Rex refused to lie down. Camera footage showed him pacing the perimeter of the room for nearly 9 straight hours, stopping occasionally to stand alert at the slightest sound from upstairs. It broke our hearts, Sarah said. He was exhausted but couldn't let his guard down enough to rest. The next several weeks brought little improvement. Rex refused food for the first 3 days. When he finally began eating, he would only do so if the family left the room completely. He reacted with panic to everyday household sounds: the dishwasher, the garage door, Emma's music. A dropped pot in the kitchen sent him into such a defensive state that he couldn't be approached for hours. We started questioning our decision, Michael admitted, not because we wanted to give up on Rex, but because we worried our home environment was causing him more stress, not less. And we had Emma to consider. She was trying so hard to be patient, but she was also afraid of him. Rex's nightmares were particularly distressing. He would wake up barking and disoriented, sometimes eliminating in the house despite being house-trained. Michael's attempts to establish a walking routine failed when Rex showed extreme reactivity to passing cars, other dogs, and especially men wearing hats or carrying objects. The worst moment came about 3 weeks in, Sarah recalled. Michael's brother came to visit. We'd warned him about Rex and had him enter very carefully, but Rex became so aggressive that we had to put him in the bathroom and ask my brother-in-law to leave. Rex was throwing himself against the door so hard we thought he'd injure himself. By Christmas 2018, the Reynolds family was exhausted and heartbroken. Despite their best efforts, Rex seemed to be making minimal progress. Dr. Leslie Winters arrived at the Reynolds home on January 3, 2019, carrying not the clipboard and clinical demeanor the family expected, but a worn canvas bag and a calm presence that seemed to fill the room. A former military veterinarian who had served in Iraq before specializing in behavioral medicine, she had worked with dozens of dogs like Rex. The first thing she did surprised us, Michael recalled. Instead of asking to see Rex immediately, she sat with us for nearly 2 hours, asking detailed questions about our observations, our routines, our home environment. She wanted to understand Rex's world through our eyes before she tried to enter it. When Dr. Winters finally requested to observe Rex, she did so via the camera system the family had installed, watching him for nearly an hour without imposing her presence on him. She saw things we'd missed, Sarah said. She pointed out that Rex always positioned himself where he could see the exit points. She noticed how he reacted differently to Michael's footsteps versus mine or Emma's. She identified exactly which sounds triggered his alertness versus his fear responses. After her observation, Dr. Winters delivered an assessment that would change the course of Rex's rehabilitation. She told us we'd been approaching Rex's recovery all wrong, Michael explained. We'd been trying to help him adjust to civilian life, to our home environment. What Dr. Winters said was that we needed to first create an environment that felt secure to Rex according to his military training and experiences, then gradually modify that environment as he developed coping skills. The plan Dr. Winters outlined was comprehensive. It included low-dose anti-anxiety medication to take the edge off Rex's hypervigilance without sedating him, environmental modifications to reduce unpredictable stimuli, and, most importantly, a complete restructuring of how the family interacted with Rex. Stop trying to help him forget he's a military dog, Dr. Winters advised them. Instead, honor that identity while helping him adapt it to a new mission. This perspective shift was revelatory for the Reynolds family. They began implementing Dr. Winters' recommendations immediately, starting with establishing a strict daily schedule that mimicked the structured routine Rex would have experienced during his service. We created a duty roster, that's literally what we called it, with set times for everything, Sarah explained. Feeding times, exercise periods, training sessions, rest periods. We used the same commands and protocols his military handlers would have used. We even played recordings of ambient sounds from military bases during certain times of day to create a familiar soundscape. Michael's military background proved invaluable in this new approach. He understood the importance of clarity, consistency, and purpose for someone, human or canine, transitioning from service. Rex needed a mission, Michael said. That was the piece we'd been missing. It wasn't enough to give him a safe home. He needed to feel useful, to have a purpose aligned with his training. Working with Carlos Mendez, the specialist trainer from Veteran Canine Rescue, who had facilitated Rex's adoption, the family developed work sessions for Rex. These structured activities incorporated elements of his explosive detection training, but in a controlled, positive context. Carlos taught us how to set up scent detection games, Michael explained. We'd hide treats or toys scented with safe, diluted essential oils that Rex could search for and clear rooms of our house. It gave him an appropriate outlet for his training while reinforcing that our home was his territory to protect. Progress came in small increments. The first major milestone occurred 3 weeks into the new program when Rex voluntarily took food from Sarah's hand instead of waiting for her to leave the room. A week later, he allowed Michael to leash him for walks without showing signs of anxiety. Each tiny step forward felt like winning an Olympic medal, Sarah remembered. The day he fell asleep in the living room while we watched TV quietly, actually relaxed enough to sleep with us present, I cried. Emma's relationship with Rex developed more slowly. The quick, unpredictable movements natural to a 10-year-old were challenging for Rex to process. Dr. Winters worked specifically with Emma, teaching her how to move predictably around Rex and recognize his stress signals. Emma was amazing, Michael said with evident pride. She created what she called her Rex rules, a list of guidelines she followed religiously. Walk, don't run. No sudden movements. No loud laughter. Always let Rex see your hands. She was more disciplined about it than most adults would have been. Yet, despite this careful approach, Rex remained wary around Emma, maintaining his distance and showing signs of stress when she moved too quickly or spoke too loudly.